Welcome, everybody. Hello, and welcome to the Doof Game Club, Doof Media's exploration of the joy of play. I'm Ruben Morehouse,
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
and we are here to talk about Slay the Spire, which is a deck building roguelike game developed by Megacrit.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the thing to start off with is, Elliot, Game Club has been introducing you to roguelikes as a genre, and now Game Club has also finally introduced you to card drafting as a genre, or yeah, drafting, deck building, that kind of type of game. So the first question I want to ask you, Elliot, is now you've played a proper deck building game. What's your thought?
I mean, okay. So we started this discussion a bit earlier off air, and I we need to continue this because something that came up last month is I said, "Oh, isn't that just like Yu-Gi-Oh?" And you said no. And now I've
Hmm.
played it, and I'm wondering what is the difference between like a trading card game like Yu-Gi-Oh and a deck builder like this? Like obviously Slay the Spire has like the roguelike aspect, and that's obviously different to a trading card game. But I don't understand the fundamental difference between trading card game and deck builder.
It's the drafting of the deck, Elliot. So the way you play, Hearthstone or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, um, you build a deck and then you go in and with that pre-existing deck you play against other people, right? So if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, you build a deck of I think it's 40 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, or 40 to 60 or whatever. Put in some blue eyes, put in some Exodias,
Yep,
etc.,
yep,
and then you take that around and you play with the same deck against a bunch of different people. Whereas a game like this, building the deck is a part of the game, and the mechanics of the game revolve around selecting cards that you add to your deck and maintaining a kind of nice,
right.
not too big deck and building out combos as you go. So yeah, that's kind of the difference.
So it's not.
Uh,
Yeah, I think I say because you're building the deck as you play. Like you'll be adding to it throughout the game and stuff,
yes, the
right?
deck
Yeah.
evolves as you go, and so if you've played games, oh, what are some good
Because
like physical versions of this?
I've played Magic the Gathering once, and that I did a
Mhm.
draft. So that was like we
So
all got
that's
together.
kind of similar,
Yeah,
exactly.
and that might be part of why I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, no, I think we played a game. Oh God, once I went to your place for a games night like 4 or 5 years ago, and we played Seven Ancient Wonders.
Yes, so that's kind of a drafting game. No, it's a card drafting game for sure. It's not necessarily a deck building game, I would say.
Yeah.
But anyway, whatever.
Okay.
Um,
Anyway, so yes, well,
yeah.
yeah. So okay, so this was my first deck builder. I mean, I quite like I like the format.
Mm. Yeah, I quite like this. I mean, I'm a big card game fan as well. I I really love. So I'm getting distracted watching this run on the screen
Do
right now.
you want me to pause
Um,
it?
I do really love card games in general, whether that's a TCG like Yu-Gi-Oh um, or deck building games like this. I just think like I guess what it is it's the fun of building little strategies and the puzzles of like, oh, I've got this card, maybe I should pick that card because that'll combo really well. I just find that a really like
Yeah.
mentally satisfying experience.
Well, like back when I did play like Yu-Gi-Oh as in middle school, it was I was like changing up my deck and sort of rebuilding it like every other match that I
Mm,
played, right? So like I
yeah.
I, I agree. Again, that's probably why I was partially confused because to me that was like most of the work is I didn't like build a deck and then just sit on it. I was constantly trying new shit and like this. I mean, you have to in this one.
Mm,
But
yeah, exactly.
like I think like just to focus in a bit more on Slay the Spire specifically because this is very much using the card game mechanics as a replacement for like traditional RPG turn-based combat. Like
Hmm.
it's like they took something like Fire Emblem or Pokemon. Those are the only JRPGs I've ever played, and like swapped out having your four moves for having cards.
A deck of cards. Yeah.
And it's so much better. like I don't like turn-based combat in
Mm.
games. This got me into it because it's not really turn-based combat. It
It's
completely
yeah.
changes the game in that regard.
Well, the big difference is you don't, you have a pool of, let's say, 20 different moves that you could do, but you
Yeah,
don't always have the same ones available, right? It
exactly.
adds a little bit of variance and randomness to the fight so that you can't rely on, oh yeah, I'm always going to have this bit, I'm never going to have that bit. You need to build things where you need to worry about like drawing the right cards and making decks that are semi-consistent and all these kinds of things
Oh,
that
and it
add
drastically
strategy.
increases the amount you can do per turn as well because of that
Mhm.
randomness. Like, something like Pokemon, they have to sort of cap you at only being able to do one thing per turn because otherwise, like, you'd have this pool of 4 moves or whatever, or you could have a pool of 10 moves and you have to pick three or something. Like, you'd still end up picking like the same combos every time. Like, it just wouldn't work. Whereas like getting 5 of your 20 randomly assigned to you, and then saying you can use X of these, like it's just such a different. Um, yeah, it just fundamentally changed the experience for me for something that I don't usually
Mm.
like in games to actually enjoying the. Essentially, it's like a little puzzle solving thing every turn. Like it's just a mini
Yeah.
puzzle.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of inherited from card games, right? Like a lot of card games have a resource that you would use to for your turn. So in Magic, it's mana. In Yu-Gi-Oh, well, they don't have one as much, but you have the kind of star system and tributing system. There's,
Yeah,
I think it's called energy in Hearthstone. Like all of these things that are um, rate limiters on how much you can do that kind of scale up over the course of playing a single, battle in Slay the Spire. And I think that's yeah, I do quite like the way that that works. It's just, yeah, you're right. It's like a little puzzle every turn, and it's awesome.
yeah. Like just compared to other like turn based RPGs that I've played, which it felt like this was the same foundation, but just using the cards instead. Huge
Mm,
improvement.
mm, yeah. Um, so let's talk about one of the things that this leads to, and one of the reasons that this is so fun is because taking this card drafting mechanic and putting it into a roguelike, it just is such a natural fit because it takes if you compare it to other roguelikes where I mean, the roguelike I always think of is something like The Binding of Isaac, right? Or even something like FTL to an extent, although FTL is not exactly a good example of what I'm about to say, but it's it's this thing where the challenge becomes not so much kind of mechanical skill, but the knowledge of how the cards interact, or the cards, the right kind of strategies to use. It really streamlines down it's all tactics now, which I really love.
Yeah, yeah. So do you want me to play this next video?
Yeah, let's do it. It's just a short little clip, but I think it's a good example of what the fun of this is it's like you'll play through and you'll get a claw and then you'll think, oh, okay, that's I've got a claw now, I'm going to go for a zero cost card combo.
Yeah.
And it just kind of allows you to pivot what you're doing. It's something I really loved about this game is it allows you to, or maybe forces you to, depending on how you how you feel about it, um, react to the cards you're getting and mix up your strategies on the fly. And it's so fun. I've had a lot of runs where I start out and I think, okay, I'm going to do some discarding stuff. I'm going to do some shiv type stuff. Then I'll get two or three, poison cards, for example, and it's suddenly, oh, okay,
I'm
let's
building a
pivot. We're
poison
now
deck.
diving down this, and we've got shiv
Yeah.
stuff to back it up, but we're going hardcore on this. Like, it's just so fun reacting to this stuff. I really do love it.
Yeah. Like for me, I think the most fun I had in this game was my first like 1 or 2 runs with each character where I was like completely discovering what their card base was about.
Mm,
And for those, like I was just taking everything I was given, and so it was like I'd get presented with a new card, and about 50% of the time I'd be like, "Oh, that's going to combine with card X in a really
yeah,
cool way," and then the other 50% I'd be like, "I don't know, that sounds cool," and then like I'd accidentally discover that it comboed with another card I had. Um,
yeah,
and I think for me that was like the most fun was the point where I was learning how these things interacted. And then you're right. And then later on, you start to be like, okay, the first three cards I've gotten have been, all like lining up with a sort of zero cost strategy or something. I'm going to like double
Mm,
down on doing that sort of thing.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do love that. Really fun moments happen in this game where you'll suddenly stop and you'll be like, "Wait, why is this happening?" Like when an enemy attacks me, they're taking damage or something, and you're like, "Wait, what's caused this?"
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
kind of walk back what's happened in your head, and you go examine your little modifiers, and then you're like, "Oh wait, oh shit, I've
Mm.
just stumbled across a really cool combo here." Um,
Yep.
yeah, always so much fun.
Yeah, I agree.
I think one of my favorite examples is I had a run where I had I was playing as the ninja whose name I forget, the ninja dancer. Um, what's it called? I can't remember. Whatever. And uh, I got a lot of retain based cards, and then I got a card where every time you retain things, it reduces their cost by one. And so I accidentally stumbled into this combo where I would just retain huge amounts of cards, and then they would reduce in cost. And then I just survive until turn 4, and then I would play like go into wrath mode and just play a bunch of zero cost attacks and kill everything. And it was just like such a fun combo that I
Yeah,
completely didn't intend. That just kind of came up, and I was like, and then I started building around it. And you get halfway through that run and you think, oh, this is like really good. I'm going to start really diving down this rabbit hole of seeing how far I can push this. And
yeah,
it's just so delightful.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's like the two runs that I actually streamed was my first run with what's the name of the Cubone one? The Silent
Sorry, what? Oh, yeah, the
Cubone. She's
rogue we
she's
call
wearing
her.
yeah,
Oh,
um
yeah, she's like a yeah.
yeah. I accidentally in that run ended up with a deck that was immensely skewed towards like the first turn domination. Like I
Yes,
had
I
about
remember this one.
6 relics that gave me stuff on my first turn. I had a bunch of cards that I forget the term for it, but they always appeared in my hand on the first turn.
Innate.
Yeah. And so basically I was doing like 200 damage in my first turn and then about like 12 after that. Um and that sort of emerged organically the first time it happened, and then like in later runs it was like, okay, like this is what I'm going to try to do.
Mm. Yeah, but it never. So this is interesting to me, and this is our next slide. So I like that you've got us to this organically. It's a good job. I would have something like that too, where I'd have a really good run, and then the next 2 or 3 runs, you try and chase that glory, and it never works,
Yeah, oh yeah,
right?
I never got back to where I was that first time, absolutely.
Yeah. Which I'm kind of sad about because sometimes I'd be like, oh, I really feel like playing a Shiv heavy rogue deck, Um, and I'd be like, okay, so the cards I need, I really want this relic that's the wrist thing. I really want marksmanship that increases Shiv damage. And I'd be like, okay, and I'll get a few things. Maybe it is I do kind of wish there was a like pre-built deck mode or something. And maybe there's a modifier where you can do that, and I just never really dug into that enough. Because I remember one of the daily runs had like a pre-build your deck vibe, and that was so much fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do kind of wish there was a pre-built deck mode as well, just so I could be like, I want to try messing around with shivs and see how far I can push the theoretical max here.
Yeah. See, I'm so told because you're right. You definitely need that mode where you get thrown in the deep end because that is like half the
Yes,
fun. Is
yes,
like, shit, how am I going to build a deck out of what I'm getting given? But then, yeah, you're right. Definitely, there are some times where I'm like, can I just get cards that are within this subset of like
yeah, yeah.
Mr. Robot's deck or something? Like,
Yeah, and people are saying in chat that there is a draft mode, but it wears out its welcome very quickly, which I think is fair.
mm,
I mean, like the fun of the game is reacting, not being able to plan out a perfect thing. Because if you could plan out your perfect deck every time, it would be boring, right? And
yeah,
that's why some of these trading card games that I have gotten into in the past, like Hearthstone or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, do get boring. It's because you're just kind of like, oh, I'll just look up the perfect deck for this strategy, and then I'll use that. Because if I don't, I'm not running the optimal deck, and I'll just be more likely to
yeah,
lose.
yeah. Yeah, we'll talk a lot more about that at Variety. We've got a slide for that later. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess this sort of leads us into our next slide, which I think you just wanted to talk about how like the strength or one of the strengths of this game is how different each character feels.
Mm, yes, and I really love this game is so. We'll get to this in a bit as well. It's so finely tuned, right?
Yeah.
Because you have these different characters, and of course it starts you off with the Ironclad, and that character is much more straightforward. Not one of my
Yeah.
favorites, in fact, but like something like the fact that it starts with burning blood as a relic where you heal HP. Um, it immediately like lets you not have to worry so much about block, for example, because you'll be gaining back health and you don't have to worry about health as much of a resource. And so it teaches you the game, teaches you how to play, and then you go to the silent and you're like, oh shit, I
Yeah.
can't heal. Like if I take damage, that's gonna stick around for a long
I
time.
hated that. Yeah, it definitely it reminded me. I liked the progression in the characters. I felt you said the
Yes.
same thing about FTL, but like you definitely felt like you start with like the Ironclad is very just like vanilla, like sword
He's the
wielding,
Mario. Yeah.
like yeah, like take hits, do blocks are sort of the
Yeah.
strategies that I employed with the Ironclad, and that's so good for when you're first starting out because you don't have to worry too much about like galaxy braining it, which you can't do
Yes.
anyway on your first go.
Yeah.
And then like you hit your second run with the silent, and then suddenly you're having to poison people and like do things
Yeah.
in a
You're
more
like,
indirect
oh wait,
way.
I can't just turn off my brain for the first 3 or 4 fights because any
Yeah,
damage I take in those fights, it's gonna stick around. Like you
yeah.
can't.
Well, and you
You
don't
have to
get the
be
same
so
like
cautious.
you don't just get bash type cards. Like you're not just getting cards that are like do 10 damage
Yeah. Do
and
big
cost 2
damage.
energies. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like you're having to poison people and think
Yeah.
more tactically. And like the first time I played with the silent, I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna have to like think now, like
Yeah.
a lot
Well,
more."
it's interesting because the silent is. It still feels like you're playing the same game, but just with different kind of
Yeah,
abilities, right? And then you go on to Mr. Robot, and to me, Mr. Robot feels like you're playing a completely different game. It's so strange, and I love each of these characters. It's actually one of the very rare games where I find myself being like, oh, I feel like playing this character instead of this character today, rather than just picking my favorite and doing it every time. Um, but yeah, playing when you start playing as Mr. Robot,
Mm.
it's wild because you suddenly have orbs and you're like, oh shit. And
Yeah,
then there's some more, I guess, more traditionally things where you can kind of heavily invest in powers and abilities, and that's kind of cool. And then you play as the ninja, and you're like, oh, I've got these dances, and I have to kind of worry about like which kind of mode I'm in. It's
yeah,
much more
yeah.
attack or
The
block,
stances,
very
yeah.
thoughtful. Like, yeah, it's
I mean,
crazy.
I think like because that was something that I think this did even better than FTL. Like, I feel like I'm going to keep coming back to FTL just because again, only two roguelikes I've ever played, so
Yeah,
it's going to come up as a point of comparison. But like FTL, like each ship felt unique, but at the same time, I could kind of emulate any build by the end
yeah,
of a
it's the
run.
same game with each ship, right?
Yeah,
And
like the Mantis
yeah,
ship starts me with a teleporter, but like and a mantis crew to teleport in, but I can get there with any other ship like after a few sectors, like and
yeah,
with good luck. With this it's such a fundamentally different game with each character that you're
yeah,
basically getting like almost 4 games for the price of one.
yeah, definitely. Who's your favorite character? Who'd you find yourself?
I liked the silent the most. I think that was the one I clicked with.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair
What
enough.
about you?
I ended up I was heavy into the silent for a while, and then I got back into the ironclad just because the ability to get huge amounts of strength and huge amounts of block just feels so fun. And then you play a card and you're like, oh yes, do 400 damage. There it is.
Yeah. I guess I don't think I ever quite got to the point where I was like consistently winning runs.
Mm,
And so what I found was rather than sort of munchkining and play, I was having more fun trying to pull off absurd shit than I was
yeah,
actually like I might be able to do better with the ironclad, but I was doing like funnier shit with the silent, so I enjoyed
yeah.
those runs more.
Well, when you say you were having trouble consistently winning runs, were you playing on like ascension modes or?
For a bit, I mean that obviously didn't help.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
it did for like the first one. I swear Ascension 1 isn't that bad, but
Well, it goes up to 20. So yeah, number one is the
right,
bare
okay,
minimum
I
of
didn't know it went
ascension.
that high.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, it was more, yeah, I don't know. Like I think I had a real problem not accepting cards, and so I think I almost always had just very wonky decks because I very rarely got to Act 3 with a deck that had less than 30 cards in it already.
Right.
Um, I just couldn't help myself. I'm too greedy. I'm like, oh, that card
Too
will be fun.
greedy. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, actually, something I want to dive into next, since we're talking about favorite characters, we should jump to the next slide. Because not only do each of the characters feel very different, the kind of archetypes that you
Yeah,
invest into with each of the characters feels very different. And then these are the ones that are listed on like the on the Slay the Spire wiki. But looking at these, I think about half of them, I'm not really exactly 100% sure what they are. But
yeah,
this is something that I found so fun is just being like, oh, okay, this is the archetype that it looks like this deck is going into. Let's start leaning into it. Let's start doing some really wild shit with it, which is always very fun.
yeah. Completely agree. Like, and again, like I think that was my favorite part of the game was the first time I would play as a character and start to try to learn on the fly what these things were.
Mm.
Like, my first run as the silent, you start getting poisons and you start being like, oh, okay. And you get a new card that combos with some of your other poison cards. And you're like, I see what I can start to build here. Um, yeah, very fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and God, it's crazy how some of these decks just feel so fun to execute. One of my favorites that I ever got was when I built a zero cost robot deck, and I would just be like, "Oh, here's 4 claws," and then I play that card that gives me back all my zero cost cards, and then here's another 4 claws, and that's it. And I've just done like, I mean, it's not even that much damage, but it just feels so good when you
Yeah.
pull off these combos.
Yeah, I had a couple of runs with the silent where I had about 8 shivs
Nice.
that I was
Yeah.
getting like in my first turn. And so it was just like,
Nice.
okay, shiv. I'm pretty boned if you didn't die in that first turn, but it
But
felt
at least
fun.
I got you with the shivs.
Those
Yeah.
those battles where I was killing like 2/3 of the enemies before anyone got to do anything on zero cost cards, it just felt great.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, good times. Good times. Good archetypes. How fun. Yeah. It's, like that's the thing about this game, right? There's so much variety. I
Mm.
feel like we could just talk about all the like all the different archetypes and what we liked and didn't like about each of them. And it's crazy because like well here's something when we were writing the notes for this I went and I saw this document that lists all the different enemies in this game, the non-boss enemies,
Sure.
and I was surprised by how few there actually are. Like when you go and look at a list there's like maybe 30 different types of non-boss enemies that you can encounter,
Yeah.
and that was crazy to me because it never once felt like I was doing the same thing I had already done.
I think there's a good amount of randomness to the enemies that helps with that. Like you definitely notice they have slightly different amounts of health.
Mm.
Each one, like they are all, there's like a little bit of variety in them, and you get them in like random groups and formations and stuff. Um, but yeah, no, you're right, and I think there's enough bosses that it just like it didn't ever feel that repetitive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think the one exception, the one time I would look at something and be like, "Oh, not this again," is that when you get the elite, that's the three like slavers. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
hate
think
that.
so.
That elite would kill me every time. It's fucking trash.
um, yeah, I can't think of any enemy I consistently hated with every character, but there are definitely like some like you come across certain types as like the silent. You just be like, oh fuck, I can't deal with you.
Yeah,
Like,
or like the gremlin knob as the silent was the one that would annoy me because every time you play a skill, the gremlin knob gets
yeah,
more strength, and the silent, you know, when I would play the silent, it's a lot of like, hey, this is a skill that gives you 2 shivs, or you
yeah,
play
yeah,
this one and it gives you block and a shiv, and I'm like, I can't do these because then it will just get really strong.
yeah. Oh, I had that. Like the one that always wrecked my silent runs was the one where you get it starts with like 20 block and it sort of refreshes every turn, but like
Oh
every
yeah,
time you do damage to it, it gets one less.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, like yeah, I think that's a boss, but like that thing just wrecked me.
No, I don't think it's a. I think it's called the. more, whatever. I don't fucking know. None of the names really stuck in my
No,
head,
me either. I mean,
except
there's like
for
you can
the
see in the
Gremlin doll.
notes. I keep calling the Ironclad Magnus. I keep calling the Silent Cubone. The Defect is Mr. Robot, and the Watcher is just Sheik.
Oh, the Watcher. That's right. The Watcher.
Yeah,
That's
I've had
right.
to open the Slay the Spire wiki to get their proper names, and I've got them
Good on you.
up on the top of my screen. I couldn't remember
Yeah.
them.
Um, of course, there is a downside to the variety in this game, right?
Yeah, so that's sort of what this slide is meant to capture here. Like it's a blessing and a curse. Just the huge amount of variety because like as you sort of already touched on, like sometimes it just means you want to do something and you can't because you don't get any of the cards that are relevant.
Yeah. Or what's worse, when you have bad luck, it just really hurts. Like, I had a run where I was doing okay. I had that relic that always gives you a potion after
Mm.
every chest, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going kind of potions, and I beat the first boss. And the boss relics I had access to were like Sozu, which is the flute that means you can't do any more potions,
Yeah.
or the Velvet Choker, and I was just silent playing a lot of cards, and so that's you can only play 6 cards a turn. And it's just kind of like, oh, I can't
Yeah.
like any
Well,
of
fuck.
these. These are all bad. Like these are all really bad for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you can definitely be at the whims of Iron Jesus in a game,
yeah,
even with those choices, because definitely like these effects are hugely mitigated by the fact that like whenever you want to pick a card, there's three to choose from. With the relics, it's still three to choose from after a boss, right?
after a boss, yeah,
Yeah. So it's like you never you never you're less often completely shit out of luck because there should be a bit of variety, but it doesn't always quite work out that way.
mm, yeah, and of course that's going to happen sometimes. And the corollary is we get these runs where it just feels everything feels so good, you know. But there are those like pivotal choices, and
Mm.
when you know you don't have any good options, it does really hurt. Or
Yeah.
you get a beat a boss and you get like a golden card, and you just get 3 cards that are like not at all what you need. And so you're like, all right, I'm just gonna skip a golden card, which feels horrible when you do
Yeah.
it, but
I
what
never
can
quite
you
managed to.
do? Yeah, of
I just
course,
tank my
you're
deck.
too greedy to skip the golden cards.
I just get hurt for it. I mean, yeah, like to touch on this, like I got to Act 4 once
Mm.
and fought the heart, the big blue heart.
Mhm.
Um, like it just steamrolled me because like I just was not at all equipped. It had that invincible thing, which was capping how much damage I could do to it per turn. And
Yeah,
at that time, I had a deck that was sort of like built around building up to do a bunch of damage in one fell swoop, and then sort of blocking for a couple of turns,
yeah.
and then building up strength again. And like it just, yeah, I got absolutely destroyed by it. It was a bit annoying because I didn't know what I was going into. So I'd like built a deck that was basically exactly countered by the heart. And I was a
Mm.
bit like, well, I don't know if I would have built a different deck. Like, almost would have had to build a deck for the heart.
Yeah, the heart is an interesting one because I got up to it and beat it once, and then I got up to it and lost to it once, and then I just never bothered with it again. Which is funny because it is like theoretically the final boss of the run, but I quite liked how optional it felt because
Yeah.
I was playing through Ascension runs, for the last week or 2 weeks, and you don't have to beat the heart to graduate the Ascension.
Mm.
And so I was just like skipping it. I would be like, all right, I don't give a shit about this. Just don't get the keys, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because when you do get to the heart, it just is like if you don't have the right kind of deck to deal with it,
Yes. And that's
you
what I've
just
seen
can't.
people say. It's kind of like, it's a bit annoying because if you want to fight the heart, you have to build a deck for it, but that's only to a certain degree within your control if you can do that.
Yeah, yeah, I really, and that made me just want to skip it. The only other thing that in the game that felt like that, where you needed the right kind of deck, was there's a boss called the Time Eater, and if you don't have the right kind of deck against the Time Eater, you're just kind of fucked. Uh,
Yeah. In general, though, I didn't find that to be a huge consistent. Like there were only a couple of instances where I would fight a boss and be like, Oh, the deck that I have built has completely fucked me for this fight.
Yeah, I think you would have advantages and disadvantages, but
Yeah, yeah,
there's never, except for the heart and the time meter, there are never scenarios that feel like, oh, my deck just can't, like I literally can't do anything here, you know?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There are some bosses where I'd be like, cool, I'm gonna wipe the floor with you. And there were
Yeah.
bosses where I was like, oh, you're gonna be a bit tricky, but they didn't feel impossible. Um,
Mm.
I like I guess, so like I think a huge part of this variety as well, just to sort of look at the screen again, like the way relics and your cards, like it's you sort of got two sets of stuff that are powering what your run is. Like
Yeah.
I underestimated at the start how much the relics would affect what direction my deck went in.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, I think that's the learning curve. You kind of think, oh, cards are the basis of this game, and
Yeah.
relics are like little bonuses on top. But then as you as you get through the game more and more, you realize, no, 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 relics are the thing that make the that let you win. Cards
Yes.
are like cool and nice, but it's relics that really make the difference.
Yeah. But having those sorts of two separate pools of things
Mm,
affecting how you play again just adds to the variety because like the way your deck combines with your relic set like again just freshens it up. Like I've never had two runs that felt even remotely the same in this game,
yeah,
and a huge part of that is the fact that even if my deck was similar to a previous deck, my relics would often be completely different.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
um
Um,
I guess the last thing I want to talk about with the variety, like there's like so many effects in this game, right? There's weakness, strength, poison, like blah 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 blah. For my first few runs, it was definitely pretty overwhelming. Like like I would fight enemies that would have like 10 effects on them at once, and like this big list,
mm,
and just like trying to keep track. Like it's mitigated a bit by you starting with the ironclad, but I got some really complicated bosses in my first run with the ironclad, and it was a bit like
right.
I was really struggling to keep up with what was going on. It's a tricky
Mm,
thing with a roguelike because FTL gave me the same thing. The first few runs, I was completely overwhelmed by everything that could happen.
yeah.
Um, and definitely, like, whenever I was first playing a character, it takes you so long to do a turn because you're learning, like, all of the cards in your hand still.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, I almost wish there was a, like, noob mode which just cut out, like, certain bosses from the pool and just kept
Mm,
the like basic ones in there, so you get your head around a subset of the mechanics first.
mm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, yeah, you're right that you kind of can't. You kind of have to be dumped in the deep end a little bit, right? And I think they do some things to mitigate that, like the fact that every character starts with, five strikes, five defends, and one other thing, or
Yeah.
something like that, right? Five strikes, five defends, and one thing that's like, and this is your special ability.
Yes. Yeah.
um, and I think that does a lot to help the learning gap, at least with subsequent characters. But you're right that for first time players, you kind of have to read all your cards and mouse over a lot of things on the
Yeah.
screen before you really start feeling confident in what's going on.
Oh, especially as someone who hadn't like played deck builders. Like the last time I played like a card game was like Yu-Gi-Oh in middle school. Like things
Mm,
like weakness and stuff were just like really kind of just doing my head in a bit.
mm.
So like I definitely would have appreciated like yeah, just like a little bit of a noob mode. Let me get comfortable. Like FTL is it kind of the equivalent of how FTL lets you turn Advanced Edition off.
Mm.
Like that sort of thing. Like let you start with a mode that just drops a few mechanics so that you can get your head around the core set, and then
Yeah,
like once you've done a good run with the Ironclad or something, then it's like okay, here's a bunch of other weird shit. Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
or maybe a pre-planned tutorial where you go through like five rooms and each one
yeah,
teaches you, do
that'd
do
do it.
strikes to finish off this, defend to survive this one, make this one vulnerable so you see how that works, like blah blah blah.
Yeah, yeah, like a set path would probably be.
Yeah.
In fact, good segue to the next one. This sort of feeds into the variety stuff we are talking about before, but I just really loved this little thing where you pick where you're going.
Mm,
And like I think most roguelikes include something like this. Like obviously FTL had something similar, but like whereas in FTL, I didn't notice it as much as a mechanic because it was so goal oriented. Like FTL would stick
Mm.
you somewhere on the left, it would put the goal somewhere on the right, and you had to map your path like that. So
Hmm.
mapping was sort of this critical thing. Whereas like in Slay the Spire, it's kind of blatantly just a little add-on mechanic. Like it doesn't really matter. Like you can see most of these paths are fairly equivalent. There's not a huge amount of choice. Like you can path a little bit, but it's like it gives you the illusion of choice more than it actually gives you choice, I think.
I strongly disagree with that. The one of the things that I kind of realize you need to learn or you need to learn before you can really capture the game is mapping of like shops and elites. Because if you don't get to elites to get relics, you're not going to win runs. And that's one of the first things that I felt I had to learn is like, oh, I can't just avoid these bosses. They're marked not so you can avoid them, but so you can go and get relics from them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, I felt the same. The only ones I ever focused on were the elites.
yeah,
But I mean, like that's the thing. Like, there's all this information on the map, and really,
yeah,
I was just
true.
looking for the elite. Like, it's kind of like I think as a mechanic, like, because you could see the way Slay the Spire works, right? It could just be, oh, I'm going up. What is it, like 20 floors or something? Like
Hmm.
you go up X floors, and it could just be like a progress bar. Like you have done floor 1, and then you get
Yeah,
randomly assigned a combat or a
yeah,
shop or something. And this is basically doing that, but giving you just this shred of choice in how you go
yeah,
about that. And it's just enough to make you feel like you have a lot more control than I think you actually do.
yeah. It's true. They're not hugely dissimilar.
Like you'll see, like
And
the elites are always in the same line as the campfires.
yeah, you'll
Um,
usually get a choice of like, do I want to go to a campfire and elite, or you'll have things where like treasures will usually be no matter what path you get, you'll pass a treasure chest here,
yeah,
kind of
exactly.
thing. Um, yeah, yeah, true.
So I just noticed it as like I think from a development standpoint, a relatively cheap uh like aspect to add to the game that like made a huge difference to me while I was playing. Like when I'm
Mm,
playing, I'm not thinking like this, but like when I took a step back to analyze it, I was just like, your path doesn't actually like it's a pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna go for the elites. And it's just like this isn't really adding that much to the game
yeah,
technically, but it really added to the experience.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I guess the other thing is the unknowns, these like events that you bump into as you play through. And it's interesting. I never got to a point where I would either seek them out or avoid them because they're sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes really good, sometimes absolutely nothing. And you're kind of like, I never had a moment where I'd be like, oh, I'm going to head to an event or oh, I'm going to avoid events. Um,
I was the opposite. I always went for the events if I could.
oh, really?
And in fact, that's like my complaint about the events is that I wish they weren't so often just a shitty battle. Like I swear,
Mm,
about 30% of the time, or even higher, an event is just like a random encounter.
mm,
Um, I like, and again, speaking of like things that actually give you more of an illusion of choice and decision making than they actually do. I love just events like getting it and getting this like all these monkey paw options for like, you can have this, but you lose this. Like, we'll take 20 HP, but give you this great relic. And it's like, fuck, I've got to fight a boss in like
In like
3 rooms.
3 rooms. Yeah, exactly.
Like that was often a highlight of the run, and it would make or break my runs. Like it's a very like bull strategy, high risk, high
Yeah.
reward. Um,
You sometimes get an event that changes the entire definition of your run. Like one
yeah,
that I would often find is the one where it like cuts your max HP to like a third, but gives you 5 apparitions.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
just is a completely different way of playing that you've now unlocked. Or
yeah.
take away all your strikes, but give you bites, right?
Yes,
Again,
the vampire one, right? Like I,
yeah.
I got that one a couple of times. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great because it really does completely change the way that things work.
Yeah. So again,
Sometimes,
adds to
sometimes
that
not.
variety. Yeah. Sometimes they fall flat, or like you'll get these options, and you're like, I don't want any of these. Like there's
Yes,
it.
that's the frustrating. When you get an event and you're like, oh, I just don't want these, and so you'll be like, walk away, but I lose 4 health or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I found them the most fun. Like I was always so disappointed when I went to an event and it would just be like, here's 3 acolytes or whatever they're called. And
Yeah,
it's like,
here's
oh
some Louises.
yeah. Um, so to go on to your next video, we're talking about the daily runs.
Yes,
Hey, I did one with a diverse as well. I wonder if this is the same day.
might have been. I loved this one. This was such a good daily run.
It was such a wild one because you ended up with the weirdest fucking decks because you were getting
This
things from everywhere.
So I think the deck I ended up with here was I ended up having 2 bombs, and I would just play 2 bombs and turtle until the bombs exploded. And that was my strategy. Um, yeah, I love the daily runs. Like I've played other games that have had something like this, and they've even with modifiers, but the modifiers have never felt really transformative. Um, But the modifiers in these daily runs really changed a lot. Like even just being able to access cards from every class, or one that was in the daily run that I played today was flight, right? Where you, instead of following the path, you can pick any of the rooms on that kind of level.
Ooh.
Um, and it always made everything feel so different. Again, like daily runs, so much fun.
Yeah, I only really got into them in the last couple of days. I think I tried like a couple halfway through the month and couldn't get into them. And it's like because it's another great way of keeping the game feeling fresh. Because like you said, those
Mm,
modifiers change the game so much, and as we've already sort of said, it feels like it's kind of 4 games in one because all the characters are so different. So you like doing modifiers where you're switching things in between them, like you combining essentially different games.
yeah.
It adds so much. Like the last few days, I've gotten really into the daily runs because they just provide another fresh, new way to tackle things.
Mm,
Like this very much seems like the sort of thing where in 6 months I can see myself just vibing Slay the Spire. So you pick it up and do a daily run.
mm,
And there's sort of no pressure to get fully back into the game. Like, you can't just sort of think, oh, I'm just going to go and pick up like, some big story based game and play like half an hour of it because it doesn't like work like that. Or like FTL, I'm sort of like, what am I actually doing with this random FTL run? There's sort of a little bit of sense of an achievement with a little goal for doing the daily run and feeling like there's something
yeah.
special about me playing it this time.
Yeah, and it's going to be something different, right? Like I
Yeah.
booted up the daily run this morning and it was cursed runs. So you start with all the things to do with like all the relics to do with curses. So when you get curses, you get more strength and you get more health, but you're collecting a lot of curses. And that was the kind of theme of the run. And I was like, "Oh shit, that's fun." And I had 1 or 2 other things to mix it up a bit, and I was just like, "Oh, what a cool, different, very different run that not a strategy I've ever played before, maximizing curses, but whatever, let's do it." And it was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about the learning curve of the game, shall we?
Yeah. So what we have up here is a picture from my second run. The focus is probably meant to be on the chat messages of everyone supporting me as I learn the game.
Very supportive. This was so frustrating to be in the audience for. Oh, it was nightmare because you would just keep saying things like, "Oh, why are my card costs randomized? Oh well," and not look into it at all, which drove me mental. And you would do it so many times. Anyway, the thing I want to talk about here is I think this game does a really good job of like educating you about the deeper layers of strategy as you play, right? So first off, you play as the Ironclad and you're kind of conserving your health a bit and you're getting strong cards. And then you'll play as the Silent and you'll be like, oh, I need to worry about my health a bit more and I need to worry about this stuff a bit more. And you kind of learn more combos and then you kind of learn, oh, I shouldn't have such a full deck because I need to start skipping cards sometimes. Then you'll learn about like map routing and then you'll learn like reacting to strategies. And there's so many like subsequent levels of strategies that you need to kind of start figuring out it just feels great. I feel like I'm still learning about the right ways to react to the kinds of archetypes that are dealt to me. Um,
Yeah.
and I can see like there's parts of the game that I know I could think about more. Like on the map screen, you can see which boss you have to fight at the end of that act, and I don't think I've
You
ever thought
can.
about that beyond
I
oh that one. Okay,
I didn't
um,
know. Does this? Oh, does the okay? Does the
the
symbol change at
symbol.
the top or
Yeah,
something? Yeah.
exactly. You can kind of look at the symbol and tell which one it is, right? Um, but yeah, but like I can see there are like another two or three levels of strategy that I'm just not at the level where I'm able to worry about that yet.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like that's the, I, at the I'm at the stage now where it's like I don't think knowing that is going to help me right now.
yeah, you're still at the stage where you have to learn to skip cards, which is an important stage to get past.
I think I actually skipped that step, and I've gone on to like learning a bit more of the game, and I need to go back. I
Yeah, maybe you
I
missed
skipped
a
a grade.
lesson. Exactly.
Because I
But
definitely like the first run where you play as a character. I think it's actually a good thing to just take every card so
yeah, of
you can just
course, you
sort of
want to
see what they are.
experiment, right? Yeah.
And then you sort of and then from there you sort of like okay, now I'm actually trying to build decks, specific combos. And then from there you start, as you said, like I'm probably at the stage now where I need to focus more on like looking at the map and figuring out, like thinking a bit further ahead.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's. I do think that it just there's so much depth to this game, but not in a way that feels super overwhelming. It's depth in that it lets you go as deep as you are ready to go, and I think that's great. I think that's just like a recipe for a really satisfying um like progression of skill in a roguelike.
Yeah.
You're not leveling up your characters or whatever, but that it's a recipe for a satisfying way to get better at the game is finding these paths to learn deeper and deeper things. I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Like compared to like I did sort of complain earlier that like my first 2 to 3 runs, I was often very confused about like
Mm,
what modifiers were on and what was happening.
mm.
Um, compared to how I felt about that in FTL, like it was nothing. Like this game, and like at the end of the day, for a roguelike, it's probably fine that for your first 2 or 3, there are quite a few moments where you're like, wait, what? Like that's not the end of the world. It definitely didn't dissuade me from playing at all.
Yeah, you'll have a bit of a confusing time, but it's not like you kind of still understand, okay, that's their health, that's my health, and that's all you
Yeah,
need to know to start off, right?
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Whereas like FTL, suddenly you might encounter someone with a teleporter or something, and it would just completely like break you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Something that I think is worth talking about is the way that this game, like the longevity of this game, I guess. Um, so I first played Slay the Spire maybe like whenever the Watcher first came out was when I first got into it, which I think was probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half.
I
But
didn't
that's
realize it was
not.
that late. So that's
But yeah, so when was this game released? Right, I'm
2017.
googling it now. 2017, right? Like
So that means
it's
the
now.
Watcher was added like what, a year or two later.
Yeah. Well, okay, so it was released in early access in 2017. Its official release was 2019. But even so,
Okay, okay.
this is a game that people have been playing for three and a bit years now, right?
Hmm.
And it's great to me how it has um, continued to stay fresh and continued to like evolve. Something this really jumps out to something that's really makes jump out to me is this game feels so well balanced, right? Like
Yeah,
it feels like every number on every card has been considered so carefully. And I think that's a factor of that this game has existed for 3 years and has an active community and has developers that basically have just spent the past 3 years continuing to update it. Like you'll see on this screenshot, which is from the Steam page, they put out a patch uh, a month ago, just like doing some stuff to the game and engaging with the community fan art. And you can see there's a video of someone playing Slay the Spire guitar covers, and it's just like, oh, this game is so cool because it has a community that is behind it and helping it to continue to evolve and become the best version of itself. I think that's great.
Yeah. And let's be honest, if you're building like a big ass card game like this, you need your community to beta test it because you are like, no matter how big your team is, you're going to miss ways to break it. And
Mm.
you basically need the community to find and tell you the ways that they broke combos to fix them. Like, I
Yeah, the
don't,
OP combos,
yeah,
exactly.
they're always going to slip through the cracks, I think.
Yeah.
And you sort of need people to be telling you about that. So I feel like that community aspect is really important.
Yeah, but the flip side of this is something that I think should be applauded is it doesn't feel like the game like has gotten bloated at all,
Mm,
right? Like something that I would worry about if I was the developer of a game like this is, well, if I'm adding like they haven't added, oh, here's 10 new cards and they've done that every 4 months or
mm,
whatever
mm.
and bloated out the game. It's just like it feels like it's an excellent level of restraint that has gone into making this game so that they are able to um, have it be such a core, compelling experience, but also so deep without just being like, and here's, you unlock, I think you unlock like 9 additional cards for each character or something like that over the course of playing them.
At that,
But that could go so much deeper. Like they could be like, and there's 40 additional cards for each character to unlock, but they,
yeah.
they don't. And I think that restraint should be applauded.
Well, and it's a segregation of the characters and their cards that helps. Like,
Mm,
they could add a fifth character
yeah,
with totally, again, unique play
totally
styles.
different.
And in fact, I
Yeah.
think that's what a bunch of the mods are, right? I saw people in our Discord talking about like a hermit character or something, which is
Yes.
like a popular mod.
And
Um,
there's like a Hollow Knight one as well.
yeah, yeah. But like that's the thing, right? Is because they sort of sit side by side. Like unless you're adding colorless cards, you can add a bunch, and it's barely going to impact the other decks. Like
Yeah.
them adding a whole fifth genre of cards isn't really going to impact my ironclad runs directly.
Yeah.
And so really the only thing they have to worry about is when they have like those daily runs where you're getting a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Um, but like I feel like that's hugely important for that bloat because what they've managed to do is get so much variety in the game, but separated into four pockets, and they could add a fifth pocket if they wanted to. Whereas like
Yeah. Yeah.
FTL, like if they wanted to add in another bunch of mechanics, like it just gets to be too much. Like there's too much to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Or even, if we go back to something like Hollow Knight, which was our first Game Club game, that obviously had a bunch of free DLC that came out with it.
Hmm.
And you can kind of feel that the DLC like bloats out the game a little bit when you get to like, oh, now I've gotten to this bit where there's the Nightmare Troop, or you'll run across something that wasn't in the original game, and you feel like, oh, this is kind of feels a little bit out
Yeah.
of place.
There were
Um,
definitely, yeah, like there were bits that either felt out of place or like, yeah, there was that one. Was it the Nightmare Troop one where it was like, now you've gotten some new thing that you can use to go collect these three things around the map? And it was like,
yeah,
okay, this is
yeah,
added after the game because it's like,
yeah,
hey, go do a whole lap of the map for us. And it's
yeah,
like, well, this
exactly.
is a bit cheap, like for someone
And it's
who's
not
just finished
obviously
the game.
it's not bad, but it does feel clunky, and it feels like it like impacts the original vision of the game in a
Yeah.
way that the expansions just like the Spire just haven't, which I think is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
I think worth pointing out as well while we're talking about, Slay the Spire's release saga, if we jump to the next slide, is that as the characters were in beta,
I
they
haven't
they
seen
did
this.
they got people to submit like card art for the cards, so the community just drew what the cards could be, and I think it's great. And one of the things I love when you play the Watcher is you can turn on the beta art and just play with these as the card art, and I think that's so good. Like, look at these, like Protect, which
Sands
is
of Time is my favorite.
Sands of Time is good. That one that's Deus Ex Machina, where a 1 health Watcher has a bus crash into the time eater. Like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I just thought this was hilarious when I saw there was a checkbox for beta art, and I did it, and I was like, oh wait, what the fuck is this? It was awesome.
That is. Wait, and again, that speaks to that fun community vibe that they left these in as an option.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I really like that.
Yeah, look at Tantrum. How funny is that? So good.
So something
Okay.
we've touched on a little bit, but it's probably your domain to talk about is obviously like, and this has come up in other game clubs, but the mods in this one I feel like got more attention than they did in any of our other ones.
Yeah, except maybe FTL. And interestingly, in FTL, I did play with mods, whereas I never turned on any of the mods in Slay the Spire. And I think the reason is because I never had a moment where I was like, okay, and I feel like I'm done with this game, so now I'll turn on the mods.
Yeah, I
Like
didn't get there in a month at
this is
least.
probably the first Game Club game that I'm probably gonna still play after the Game Club's done, just because it feels like even though I beat with every character and I've got like I've done some ascension runs on each character and stuff, I feel like there's so much that I haven't done yet, you know?
Well, this
And
wasn't a
so I,
game where I always felt like I was having to progress. Like it's so fresh and varied that like I just loved each run on its own standing. Whereas like with
yeah,
FTL, I would start every run. I would be like, I want to win with this ship so I can unlock this next ship. Like it was a lot
yeah,
more mission focused for a run. Whereas say the Spire, it's just kind of like, let's see whatever wacky shit happens with
yeah.
this,
I'm
Mr. Robot
vibing
run.
this now, so I'll just do it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Which is why I didn't. I took a look through some of the mods, which is where I got the screenshot from. And there's
Yeah,
like a Hollow
great
Knight one, and
example.
there's like a Hermit one, and they both seemed like they were quite well balanced and well respected in the community. But I was just kind of like, no, I still feel like I need to dive into the basic experience more, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely not done with just the core experience yet. Um,
This mod just reskinned the Emily. It is formerly known as Guardian Chan, but renames to Waifu the Spire now. Guardian Chan can't is not enough to generalize the content of mod. I love this mod. Look at it. It just makes all the bosses into cute anime girls.
that's probably not going to be the
Guitarist.
first one I install. Um, moving on, I wanted to talk about
Yeah,
our.
moving swiftly on.
I wanted to talk about our good friend Mr. Whale Person.
Mhm.
Um,
It's like Niao, I think is the name of this thing.
it confused the shit out of me the first time it came up. Nobody told me that there was a giant whale in the game. Um, I just love this as something that encourages you to try and like gives you a sense of continuity between runs. So
Mm,
my understanding of how this whale works is they give you like a boon if you made it like a certain amount in your previous one, like or depending on how far you got, they give you something cool.
I think it's you get a boon anyway. If you don't get past the Act One boss, you don't get as good of a boon. But then if you get past the Act One boss, you get better boons or more
Something like
boons
that.
to choose from, or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely dependent on how far you went. Um,
Yeah.
and I just love that as a kind of making me feel like even if my run ends in Act Three or on the Act Three boss,
Yeah.
like next time I'm still getting a bit of a reward for trying
Yeah. It
and
doesn't feel like
making
a
it that
total
far.
failure. It's interesting, isn't it? Because that's kind of something that from a design standpoint really separates a lot of roguelikes is some of them have permanent upgrades or whatever, or even character customization, and some of them don't.
Like in this
But
one,
it
you get access to more cards after you do better with like the Ironclad, right?
yes.
Like the more you play with the Ironclad, the more Ironclad cards you unlock, and that will like give you the ability to change how you play with the Ironclad later on because you'll just have
Yeah.
access to more stuff.
Yeah, but the really interesting thing to me about this is it kind of is a bit of like it straddles the line in a way that feels very natural, but also doesn't feel like it cheapens the pure roguelike vibe of it,
Yeah, yeah,
because you are getting a benefit from getting further, but it's not. Yeah, I guess I can't quite put my finger on it. It's just like a little thing that you get. Doesn't feel major enough to ever work towards like I'm gonna tank this run so I get the next one with this bonus. But it
yeah, yeah.
also and it's like ephemeral enough that it's not a permanent upgrade. It only ever applies for the next run. But yeah, it just like straddles the line between helping you and encouraging you perfectly, I think.
I think I'm going to compare it to like the maps and the routing as just another thing. I think what elevates this game from good to great is all of these little extra bits that
Mm,
so something like the map is just it's not adding too much to just having a progress bar, but it's just enough to make a huge difference. This again
mm,
feels like such a little mechanic off on the side, but it made such a difference to how I played. So it's like Slay the Spire to me sits in two sort of camps. Or on the one hand, it's a very incredibly well balanced and designed card game, and then on the other
Mm.
hand, it's got all these other little mechanics sitting on top of that feel or change your gameplay so much more than how deep they actually are. Like it's so many.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word cheap because that feels like derisive, but
Yeah.
they've like much smaller and simpler mechanics to implement than like other mechanics that would have that much of an impact on how I engage with the game.
Well, like we haven't talked at all about potions, right? Because
Yeah,
and potions are another perfect example of this. It's a small mechanic that honestly you could ignore if you really wanted to, and you'd I mean it would be
I
a
mean there are
disadvantage, but
relics that make you.
yeah. Well, yeah, if you get Sozu, right? But yeah, it's just this thing of like here's another little thing, and it might make slightly an edge in some situations, but you know, you could just completely ignore it if you wanted to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like another level of depth that you can start kind of optimizing, which I think is great.
Yeah, but I think this is just a really great design strategy for a game is having a strong core, which is like the card stuff,
Yeah.
and then building lots of these little things that just interact with it and each other in such a flexible way that they add together like so much more than the sum of their parts.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Also,
Um,
just to compare again to FTL, I preferred my run lengths in Slay the Spire a lot more than FTL.
but they're the same. This I was thinking this when we started the game club this month. It feels like it's about the same length. Like a run in Slay the Spire is like an hour to an hour and a half, and that was more or less what a FTL run was. Maybe an FTL run was like 20 minutes longer on average.
I felt like my FTL runs were longer, but maybe that's because often in FTL you had to spend so much time waiting.
I I, I actually think it's in FTL. I never felt like I was in danger up until the final parts of the game. Whereas in Slay the
Right.
Spire, it doesn't feel like the first third, the first act is just like an turn off your brain to get through this bit kind of thing. That there's a
Yeah.
lot of because your cards are a lot weaker and you still have to make the trade-off of going to fight elites and stuff when you don't have good cards. You're like it's still just as hard at the start as it is at the end, which I think is great.
Well, and you don't things don't turn as quickly. Like in FTL, it would be fine, 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 and then the second something goes wrong, like I'm about to die.
Mm.
Whereas inside the Spire, I knew I was going to die for a bit of time before I did. Um,
Mm.
and things like Mr. Whaleman mean that I
I
didn't
think
feel
it's
like it
a
was just wasted.
lady, actually. I
Oh,
hate to say it,
Mr. Whale person.
Mrs. Whale. You
Oh
can't
yeah.
say Mr. Whale
Whoops.
person.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Mr.
That
is
didn't that
gendered.
didn't help at all. Uh,
Mr. Whale man. Oh, sorry, Mr. Whale person. You goober.
I'm trying to see if there's anything on the artwork. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just stick with they them for now.
No, it's I mean, unless the wiki is wrong or whatever, but whatever.
Okay, if you've checked, yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
uh, so yeah, is there anything else we have to talk about here? Here's another thing on the next slide. Just like this is a weird one. Let's play the clip first. Roll clip.
do you want me to turn the audio on for this one?
The audio is on for this one, isn't it?
No.
Oh, well, yes. You should turn the audio on for this one.
Why this black bar go away? Okay, hold on, everyone. I gotta wait for this. Oh my god.
Now, that was a weird clip. All I really wanted to show off with this one was
It's not working. Go away. I hate this.
the little presentation bar. All I wanted to show off on this one was like the sound design in this game feels really good.
There we go. I got the sound working. Yeah, I think the art and the sound were both fantastic. Like just to talk about them together. I think, to be fair, this is an easier type of game to develop an art and sound style around because
decks.
there's only like one or two things happening at once,
Good.
right? Or like there's it's a lot more predictable. Like, if you look at something like Outer Wilds for the art, like you had to. There's so much
Hey.
going on, lighting changes, the camera
Yeah,
angles.
Outer Wilds is a big 3D game where you're
Yeah,
traveling across different worlds, right? Whereas this is, I mean, and it's fairly straightforward. You're just going through a dungeon. Like even the
yeah,
background plates don't like change around that much, or I didn't notice if they did.
yeah. Like every time I encountered a new boss, I got a kick out of the art and whatever weird ass sounds they would make. It's a very like I love the vibe of this game that the art generates.
I really enjoyed the sound. First of the sound design, I think it was great at making sure that you had kind of consistent sounds to know what was happening. Like you'd hear a little, oh, I've just gotten a debuff, or oh, I've just had a card be exhausted, or whatever.
Mm.
But also the enemy sounds, the cacaw of the ritual bird people, like
I thought it was very satisfying sound effects for like when you even just do any kind of attack or anything. Like just a good nice thwomp.
yeah, really um unobtrusive, but very simple and kind of clean, simple and clean sound effects. If I may
Yeah.
quote, Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, I found the sound effects in this game, the sound design in general was really well done, and I think that's not really celebrated a lot in games. So calling it out now, Slay the
Yeah.
Spire, great sound design.
I feel like sound design in games is a very thankless profession
Yeah, for
because
sure.
if it doesn't work, people will crucify you because it gets noticed. Whereas like good sound design almost doesn't get noticed because it just works.
Yeah,
Like you're way more likely to notice and comment on discordant sound design than you are on good
yeah, of course.
sound design.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's everything we had to say about Slay the Spire. Fat decks, good decks. Any other
Yep.
questions?
Bigger deck, better.
Yeah.
Bigger deck is better, as everybody knows. Yeah, see, so there's something that Vale just said where
Yeah.
they usually leave sound off when they play games, which is something I do too. Usually I will turn off music and sounds or one or the other. But in this game, I had them both on, and I loved the sound. Like the sounds, I just found it very, like even if I was like watching a YouTube video or something while I would play the game, I found it very good to have the sound going because it genuinely just helped your understanding of what was going on
Yeah.
so much. It was great.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because I watched most of season 2 of Fantasy High while playing this game,
Mm.
and I had the sound on my Switch, and obviously I had the sound on the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. Whereas yeah, like normally I would turn the sound off on the game I'm playing.
Mm.
But I think the Switch's volume was down a bit, but yeah, interesting.
Mm. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Any cues that they want to have aid?
Or just any comments?
Comments? Anything that you thought about this game? Any other thoughts that you've got, Elliot? What was your favorite deck archetype?
Um, probably I don't know the formal definition. Uh, I liked poison based silent decks.
Mm.
Maybe I'm just a psychopath, but like there's just something fun about slowly leeching away the life from your enemies while they can't do anything about it.
My favorite thing about poison decks was that turn where the enemy has like 18 poison and they've got 16 health, and you draw your cards and you just go and click end turn immediately to
Yeah.
watch them die. I always felt so sadistic, but it was so much fun to do.
Yeah. I just love like loading poison on them and then just blocking. It's just
Yeah.
like just standing there and glancing their attacks away while they slowly die in front of you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I have a problem.
You do definitely. Some questions. Miss Fist, did you try any mods? We talked about that, but yeah, just with the fact that we still had so much to do in the game, right?
Mhm.
Not yet is the answer. Yeah. A question from Mator: did we feel that the RNG was frustrating, or did we feel in control of our runs? I think I probably did about 30 runs over the course of this. The course of maybe like 40, I'm not sure, something like that, 30 or 40. And I think I had one that felt frustrating because of RNG, where I was like halfway towards getting a poison deck, but it just never quite panned out. And then I got like just a mix of weird shit, and it never really worked. For all the rest, I felt more or less in control.
I think since I spent like a good chunk of the month not really specifically going for combos because I was still learning for like half the month
Mm,
because I was playing all four characters. Like I think I didn't feel hurt by the RNG just because I was a total slave to it. Like I was just taking whatever it gave me. So I very much enjoyed that because I was still in the mode of like exploration. Um, I I started to run up against it a bit more as I've started to make that transition to trying to build specific deck archetypes.
mm, yeah, I feel like you can't set out. I did this once or twice where I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna try this deck this run, and
Yeah,
you just can't do that. Like it just never works
yeah.
out.
I don't think I ever really tried that, but I would like halfway through Act One have sort of gotten three cards and think, okay, I'm going to do this type of deck, and then from there just not really get the cards to help me with that. Like that's what I've run into
Yeah,
recently is like needing to pivot halfway through Act Two because I'm no longer getting the cards to build the kind of deck that I was trying to build.
yeah. I guess maybe that's something that I quite liked about the game as well. Is I didn't feel like you could ever just have one archetype of your deck. Like
No, yeah,
that would never really work. You needed to have like, okay, I've got this as my kind of poison packet. This is my packet of shivs. Here's my block packet, and I've got some stuff to like discard and draw cards.
well,
And so that's kind of yeah.
because most archetypes rely on there being two aspects to it. Like for instance, like a heavy poison deck relies on you also being able to block.
To block
Um,
or maybe get like intangible. Yeah.
yeah, or like my like whenever I did like a bit of a zero cost type deck where I really loaded up on cards that cost nothing, I would then balance that out with a couple of cards that just cost a shit ton. Like the sorts of
Mm,
cards that cost 3 or 4 energy, I usually never use. But when I've got a deck where half my cards cost zero, suddenly I can be like, well, I'm ending half my turns with 3 energy remaining. Like I may as well
mm,
chuck in a few of these very powerful but too expensive cards that I don't usually like.
yeah.
And so then you end up with a deck that's like half zero cards, half cards that are super expensive.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's always like a couple of things you can go with to like keep powering whatever archetype you're going for.
Mm,
And
yeah.
then, as you said, you can start to combine archetypes as well
Yeah.
to an extent.
I think the term in card games is splashing different mechanics, So you have like, oh, I'm my main mechanic is this, but I'll splash some poison in there.
Okay.
I don't know if that's right or not. I don't know. Anyway,
I mean,
next
neither do
question,
I.
Elliot. What
Um,
ascension level did you get to?
Um, I think I got to 3 with the silent. I
Nice.
I admit I didn't try for ascension too much. I just liked going and doing random shit most of the time. I don't think I really aimed to. You said there's 20.
Yeah.
That's a bit much for my taste.
Yeah. I think I got Ascension 3 on the Ironclad and the Silent and 1 on the other two.
Yeah.
Anyway. Um, at what point did you get hooked on the game? Or was it more related to discovery, exploration, or learning to beat the game, or something else? Interesting question. What point did you get hooked on the game? I think for me, it's like roguelikes are one of my favorite genres of game, as are card games. And so this was just kind of like I knew I would like it from the get go.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I was kind of the opposite. I had very little experience with either. Um, I think it was I had a bit of a weird start because I started playing on PC and then had to switch to playing on my Nintendo Switch, so I had to like restart.
Mm,
And it was probably my first silent run on the Switch where I was like, okay, like I'm into this.
mm,
In a way, because like I definitely my first few, it was sort of like, okay, this is improved turn-based RPG combat, but it's still turn-based RPG combat was sort of my thinking at the time. I was like, it's like polishing a turd was I think the phrase I used at one point, which is harsher than
you
I
have
meant it
such
to be.
weird game opinions, Elliot. It's
um,
crazy to me.
but I mean, I definitely sort of as I kept playing, I got more and more into it.
Yeah.
No, polishing your turd. I wanted a better phrase. It comes out harsher than I meant, but
Yeah.
that's the sort of sentiment I'm going for. It was like
Such
I still
so
felt like you were
weird.
doing something on a like bad core, but like I felt a lot less like that as I got more into it.
Such a weirdo you are. Question from Kyrgyzstan. Favorite event? I think I have to give a shout out to the event that references Worm, just because that's great. I
There's
loved
a
that when I
worm
came across
event.
it. Yep. You can get to a library, and if you do the right thing in the library, you read this book about what's the quote? All right, let me
I've
pull the
definitely
quote
been
so I can
into the
read it out to you.
library. I mustn't have done the right thing. This is FTL all over again, where like I chose the wrong thing and missed out on the fancy crystal ship or whatever the fuck.
Um, all right, here's the quote. Uh, okay. So you read a book and then you get this quote. The story is about an insect controlling teenage girl who aspires to become a hero. The book is filled with creative uses of powers, combat strategies, and various perspectives. Satisfying.
Okay, yeah, that does seem like it's referencing Worm.
It's 100% a worm reference.
Um, no, I didn't get that one. I definitely ended up in the library, but there were like three options for what I could do, and I must have not picked that one.
Mm. Yeah, I think this is full of references, this game, right? We didn't really talk about it, but
Yeah.
there's a relic that's like the sunflower from Plants vs Zombies. There's like references to Assassin's Creed. Like this game is packed full of fun references and stuff like that. So it's good
Yeah.
stuff. It's always fun.
I think I'm struggling to pick a favorite event because I feel like I only hit most of them once, and I don't quite remember the details of all of them. Like, often to me it just comes down to I've been given three options for a cost and a boon, right?
Mm,
Um, the one that stands out to me is a very specific one. It's one we've already referenced, which is the one where you turn into a vampire,
yeah.
just for completely changing the way that you play the game after that point.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, what else? Oh, Kyrgyzstan says there was a you actually did get the worm reference event, but you didn't read the text. And Kyrgyzstan in chat said, "Oof, that pain as hell. It skipped right past it." Good
Which
stuff.
is that in one of the ones that I streamed?
Yeah, it must have been. What is your favorite enemy? Is a question from 567.
Oh, it's definitely not the slime.
Mm-hmm.
I can rule that out as my least favorite. I know I'm doing the opposite of what you asked. I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite. What about you?
Um, I feel like I would answer this question just by saying the enemies that I always felt like capable to beat, you know. Oh yeah, the cultists, the caca cultists were always pretty
Just for
fun.
the sound effects.
Yeah, and the fact that like you know what you're getting with them, they do their ritual and then they just get hit you over and over and get stronger each time. I liked fighting the splitting slimes. I think uh, in terms of bosses, I mean, I found the Hexaghost pretty fun. I
Yeah,
like
yeah. I was gonna say the Hexaghost too.
the fight where you're up against the knight and the cleric. That's a fun one. Yeah, I've found a lot of fun fights. I don't know.
Yeah.
I only really had some that I hated, like the Gremlin Knob or the Three Slavers.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, Tringard references I think it's called the fading something something shadow or something, where it does a bunch of damage, but every time you hit it, it loses strength, and then on turn 4 or 5, it just poofs away.
Mhm. Oh yeah, on one of my first runs, I encountered that it was like an event or something, or maybe it was an
The
elite.
transient.
It was one and it had 999 health,
Yeah.
and basically, but it would die after 4 turns, and so is that this one?
Yes, that's the
Yeah,
one.
and so like what I realized like towards the end of my first turn is like, oh, I just have to outlast this thing. I don't have to kill it. It's a survival game, and I didn't do very well in that run because I did not have. That was one of those runs I was doing with the silent where I was completely built around that first turn.
Yes.
And so it was kind of like I did a bunch of damage. And I was like, I don't have the ability to block for 4 turns. I'm fucked.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that, oh yeah, yeah. Anyway, yeah, lots of cool stuff in there. Yeah, cool.
Something-
Any other questions?
I think we skipped over a few.
Oh, do
Misfist
we?
asked, "Do you think you'll play more now that Game Club's over?"
Oh yeah.
I think you said yes, or that you
Yeah,
plan to.
definitely. I think I will.
I think I will. I haven't. I had to uninstall FTL about 2 days after the Game Club because I kept playing too much of it. Um, I might have to do that with Slay the Spire as well. We'll see, but like, um, yeah. I mean, this might run into the same problem where if it's like, suddenly I'm taking 2 hour lunch breaks because my runs are going for 2 hours, and I have
Mm,
to work till 7 p.m. Like I'm gonna just have to uninstall it.
mm, mm. Yeah. Um, yeah, I definitely will play it more. I mean, next month we'll talk about what we're doing next month, but I expect I'll have spare games time based on the games we've got next month. So,
Do you think you want to
um,
try climbing to Ascension 20? Was asked
I think
by
so.
five
I
six
think
seven.
so. Right?
It,
Because it's a fun challenge. I at least want to try and unlock all the have got all the relics. You know.
yeah, yeah. I'd maybe go for something like that. I haven't felt goal oriented in this game, which is very odd for me.
Mm,
I'm almost always about
you're a
having
collector for
goals
sure.
and collecting stuff. So it's
Yeah.
been a very odd experience with this game. I just haven't given a shit.
Mm,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I haven't felt the need to chase Ascension 20.
fair enough. Are there any other questions that we missed? Oh, would we be interested in playing other games in the same vein, like Monster Train specifically?
Yeah, I've seen a bit of Monster Train. It really feels like it's a spiritual.
It looks really complicated, though, don't you think? Maybe it's just me. Maybe this again speaks to the visual clarity of the design of Slay the Spire. But Monster Train looks so complex, even if it isn't.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough to comment. I honestly I don't feel like I would jump into something like that. Like So the Spire has met this need for me. Like this is the sort of game I don't usually play, and I've gotten
Mm,
really into this. And then I'll probably play a bit more and install it for a while. But like I don't see myself rushing into something like Monster Train. I feel like maybe a year or two down the track, I'll be like, oh, what else is out there?
mm. Yeah, yeah. We'll see. Um, any other questions, folks? I
Last
guess
chance.
last chance before we go and talk about what's happening next month. All right, let's jump to next month. People are now talking about Monster Train in chat.
Yeah.
Next
Well,
month we'll
Ruben, you
be
should talk
playing
about this.
Monster Train. Oh, wait, no. What? Oh, that's right.
I think Monster
Yes.
Train actually lost the vote like a month or two ago. So if it's ever going to appear on Game Club, it'll be a fair way down the line.
Yeah. So next month, we're going to be playing specifically 3 Australian indie games. I wanted to do a vote of Australian games, and part of that is that Australia makes a lot of small indie games
Yeah.
that wouldn't be long enough to play for a full game club. So I put 3 of them into a pack, and that's what people voted for. It's called Ruben's Little 3 Pack. So we'll be playing
Yeah.
three different short games that all have playtimes. I think Paperbark and Florence are like an hour or 2 hours each. Getting over it is somewhere between 2 minutes and 6 hours, depending. um,
It'd probably be like 20 for me.
yeah, so we'll be talking about all 3 of these games next month. Feel free to play as many as you like. I would definitely recommend Florence. I haven't played it, but I've heard a lot of really good things about it. And Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy is, again, a
Yes.
very interesting game. I
Yeah.
haven't played Paperbark, but it's, again, got a lot of good things that I've heard about it. So check out as many of these games you feel comfortable checking out, and we'll be talking about them next month.
Yeah, so we should say for those who aren't patrons and might have missed it, like one of the things that we stole from the book club formula over here on Doof is every 6 months Ruben and I have the ability to just sort of pick what we do next rather than
Mm-hmm.
putting it up to a vote. And this month was Ruben's, but he decided to do a bit of a Aussie game vote
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and what one was this variety pack.
Yep.
I know absolutely nothing about Florence and Paperbark. I haven't even watched the trailers for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have seen a video of Donkey on YouTube playing Getting Over It, and I'm not looking forward. I think the game is specifically designed to target and torture certain types of players, and I think I am one of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think so. For those of you who, I mean, we'll talk about this next month as well. But Bennett Foddy is the person who designed
Quap.
Quap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like watching Bennett Foddy's track record of game design and seeing it culminate in getting over it, which is like the ultimate epitome of this. Where we'll talk about this next month. Anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
but yeah, it's going to be so much fun. We'll be streaming it, so details on that will be in the Discord if you're a patron, so you can check that out as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and stream all three this month. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think I will too. We'll definitely stream Getting Over It. Florence and Paperbark, we might stream as well, but honestly, they're probably the kind of games that you want to experience yourself, I suspect.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
the images are not in the same order as the list. So Florence is the middle one here with the kind of hand-drawn art style. Getting Over It is the one on the far right with the guy in the cauldron, and Paperbark is the story of the wombat on the left-hand side there. Cool. Yeah, you might as well just go fix that up quickly. Good on you.
Fix.
Good effort, Elliot. All right, well that's that, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone
Thanks
for
everyone who came
joining
along.
us. Yep.
Yeah, I had a good time with Slay the Spire. A lot more than I expected to, honestly.
We'll force you to love roguelikes one of these days, Elliot.
Yeah.
I can't wait until I finally get you to play Crypt of the Necrodancer and you love it because it's the best.
I was genuinely surprised that wasn't just something you picked for your.
We've done so many roguelikes.
Yeah,
I mean, I love
true.
Crypt of the Necrodancer is my favorite game, so I'm gonna force it upon you at some point. But I thought
we have just done 2 in the last 3
exactly.
months.
Let's chill out a little bit first.
That's a good point. Yeah. So I guess the only other thing, for those of you who are watching who are patrons, we will be sending out another poll for all of you in the next few hours, probably. Something that's been coming up a lot is a lot of people want us to tackle bigger games like Dark Souls or some of these ones that have like 40-hour runtimes. And we just don't know that we can commit to finishing those in a month. There's been a lot of discussion about how we should get that to work, and what we thought is we're gonna poll the patrons, since they're the ones who vote, to try and figure out, or to get a vibe on how we should tackle it. So the results of the poll may not necessarily be binding, but it'll be good to know what all of you think.
Yeah, what people would like to see.
Yeah, because there are a bunch of different ideas. So we'll probably have like 4 or 5 options of how you guys might want us to tackle something like a 40-hour game, whether it's over 2 months or whatever. So keep an eye out for that, because that will be really useful for a lot of these games. People seem pretty desperate for us to play.
All right. Yeah, so check out that poll and have a good time. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you later, everyone.
Bye.